Okay, so I guess we can start off with a bit of an introduction. So, hi everyone, welcome to the webinar. So, for those of you who aren't aware, my family, we've been running like a 5-day design camp this past week, basically to teach people who are interested in graphic design and just design in general about design. So, we've been using a free tool called Canva to teach about graphic design, just talking about things like color theory as well, and just like design in general. And we've been making designs for a few people, including HIS, or his male breast cancer awareness. So I'll link the Instagram page we have in the chat for those of you who are interested in looking at our designs that we've made. And then also I'll link the Male Breast Cancer Awareness Foundation's Instagram page as well. If you want to take a look or drop a follow, we might be having some of our designs showing up in those in the coming weeks. And you can also, they also have a link to their website if you want to learn more about it. Okay, so the overall goal of this webinar is to further educate people who are like interested in the world of design, and then also more specifically the world of design as it relates to the world of technology as well, where those collide. So we want to show people that they can find a career path that works for them and that also caters to their strengths and interests. So we have a guest speaker with us here today. I'll just introduce him as Vijay Uncle. So since that's what I know him as, but he'll be speaking to us today about his journey as a person heavily involved with design and technology. It's something that he's been, very involved in throughout his whole career. So a little background on his career. So Vijay Uncle has over 20 years of experience working in HCI, which is human computer interaction, UI UX, which is user interface and user experience, design and CX strategy, which is like customer experience strategy, brand management, and a bunch of other things as well. I won't list all of them. And he's worked for a large variety of clients and people during his 10 years with companies like IBM, where he was an intern, Kronos Incorporated, Analog Devices, and his current job as Vice President of Digital Experience at Unum, since graduating from Virginia Tech with a master's degree in computer science, majoring in human computer interaction and user experience in 2001. And those weren't all of his jobs he's done. Those are just some of them, just so you know. So with that background, I guess I wanted to start off by just having you speak a little bit about your career path and what kind of piqued your interest in terms of the world of design and the world of, human computer interaction. So I was wondering if you could start off with having you speak a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, first of all, thank you for having me, Rohan and Chandra and the Pure Group. Really appreciate it. And this is my favorite topic. I love to talk about and met a lot of other designers in the industry. So thank you for having me. Before I get started, I want to ask one question of the audience, and anyone can speak up. When somebody says user experience or UX, what does come to mind? Anyone? Kids, preferably.
Whenever I think of that, I think of how something is set up so it's easier for a user to use it, and how comfortable they are.
That's perfect. That's really well said, Mansa. That's kind of at the core of the definition, right? Whatever you're designing, you're building, end of the day, a user has to use it. A human being has to use it, at least as of now. Who knows in the future, right? That's what you're designing for. So how I got into this, so my undergrad was in India. I did it in computer science, came straight to Virginia Tech to do my master's. And like many of my friends, two choices were in front of me. Either I specialize in computers, in networking, or databases, right? Virginia Tech had this special program, not special program, but they were really at that time top 5 in human computer interaction. I had never heard of that term until I got there. And I was very intrigued the way they were teaching it. They would teach Java 101 with an emphasis on user experience and design. So I was very intrigued. I took a course, got so hooked on because the core of it was, hey, You can write code all day, you can write algorithms all day, you can crunch numbers all day. End of the day, if a user is not an end user, it's not resonating, what good it is, right? And we see that today, right? How many of you guys use iPhones? Right, I can't see hands, but I'm guessing majority of us, right? Um, but in reality, the Android operating system and the Samsung ecosystem, if you will, is much robust than an iPhone. But why do majority of people use iPhone? Because the ease of use, the ecosystem play they have, the app store and so on. So the ease of use end of the day makes a lot of difference in companies too. So that's how I got into it. I'm like, I can write programs, I can write code, but if I'm that won't make me happy. So that's how I got very intrigued. It gives me an opportunity to interact with end users, see how they're doing it, how and it's frustrating sometimes when you observe people using it, what you have designed, and they don't use it the way you thought it was. It's pretty brings you down to earth, and it's pretty humbling moment at that point. So that's how I got into it.
Thank you for that. So moving on, as you were talking about your journey and as you're talking about, how you found out about human computer interaction, one question that I had personally was, did you ever second guess your decision to focus on a field that was a little bit more niche or not as well known? Was that ever a disadvantage? Was it an advantage maybe because there's less competition? How did you see that in your experience starting out in that field?
Yeah, I'll tell you. It's not about second guessing. In my case, yeah, there were doubts, right? When you're looking for a job and the market crashed and there are not many jobs, so it raises a doubt. But when you believe something so strongly that that's the path you want, end of the day, if it was a job and I could go get into programming, but if I'm not happy, then would I survive? Yeah, maybe, right? In the long term, in the long run, if you're not doing something, and it's a cliche, right? If you do something that you don't enjoy, you're not gonna last. So I did have my doubts. I'll be very honest with you, right? Because and then back in what 99, 2000, UX was not even a term, right? It was usability engineering or HCI. And there were very few people out there who would do this. So yeah, it was more a doubt in the mind, but as we found, luckily, I found right opportunities to continue on and keep building. The one thing I would say though, and I say a lot to a lot of young professionals who come into career is look at it in a 5-year increment, right? Your life in 5-year increments. It's great to have a 20-year plan, but if you are in technology space, it's changing so rapidly. So have a view of 5 years, what you want to be, where you want to be, and that's how you adjust.
Okay, so thank you for sharing that advice and the interesting outlook on, I guess, your career. So moving on, I guess my next question again relates a little bit to what you just said at the end there. So I was wondering if you had any kind of advice that you would give to younger people starting out with so many options. I know you spoke about obviously looking at things in terms of a 5-year plan because you never know how things will change in the future. But in our course, when we're introing it, we talk about how graphic designer is just one of many different designers, even just in the realm of technology itself, not even in other industries, just in technology. You can be a brand designer, you can be a creative director, you can be a web designer. There's so many different things that you can be. So I guess the first question I have is, do you have any advice for those people in terms of being able to pick what they want to do because there's so many options? And my other question is, when you have kind of picked that thing that works for you and you know that you want to do it, how do you stand out? How do you build a brand or reputation for yourself? And how do you, do you have any advice as to that as well?
That's a great question, Rohan. I would say a couple things here. When you think about the field of design, human-computer interaction, there are three broad categories, right? One is pure user research, ethnographic research. You're going into users' context, following them, understanding, and just coming out with insights based on what you've heard, right? So that's one. Second is what we call interaction design, right? Think of it as no colors, right? You're doing a blueprint, right? If you're building a house or a car, right? For that matter, there is a mock-up of it. It's in clay. It's like the blueprint. It's very black and white boxes and arrows. The idea there is you're trying to figure out, forget about the colors and the aesthetics of the design, but what is the easiest way that you can get user from point A to point B, or get them to do a task, right? That's what we call interaction design. Then the third part of that is visual design, right? You talked about brand, color theory, visual, right? You've got like, I am not one of them. I'll be very honest with you. You give me color, I can tell you when I look at stuff whether it's good or not. I cannot, for life of me, come up with. I'm not an artist by nature, right? I can do the other two. So there are three components when you look at a macro level. Again, we have, I feel, in the HCI user experience world, done disservice where you have 25 different job titles. Software developer, it's the software developer, front end, back end, and that's pretty much it, right? So there are three categories, and three of them are slightly different. So it depends upon what your interests are. If you want to get into this area and you are pursuing this area, I think having that view of research is so critical for the other two, because end of the day, what products you build and design have to resonate, have to have an empathetic view for the consumers, right? Has to serve a need, right? If you're not solving, it might look the best design, but if it doesn't meet user needs, it's an art project, right? You had a second part to your question, sorry.
Yeah. The second part of my question was just about, when you've decided what you want to do in terms of your career path and where you want to go, what direction you want to go in, how do you stand out and build like a brand or reputation for yourself?
Yeah, that's another great part, right? I'll give you just the stats here. When we came to Boston area, it was 2007. There were like 100 UX people, and these are like true practitioners of UX, right? We have an annual conference, and this year we had like 1,100 people show up, right? So with the emergence of the field, there are like a lot of people come in. So how do you differentiate yourself? I would say, yes, your core skill is as a designer, pick whichever area you want to specialize in, which is great. You got to really be good at. But then what differentiates you from others, right? Now you start adding the surround system to it, right? Either it's data and analytics, right? Or it's thinking about product. It's product, like how the product management happens. Or you can even add code to it, right? There is front-end development like HTML, JavaScript, Python, what have you, right? Or you can say, hey, I'm really good at design and business, right? That's an emerging area now where like a lot of top companies are starting to, especially technology companies, want people to head the organization who are really good at design and business, right? Steve Jobs really championed that, right? So yeah, I think get really good at the skill and then surround yourself with other things. Obviously, it has to interrelate with your other interests. In my case, I'll share design and technology, like the computer science and programming is what I learned and became strong at, and then surrounded with analytics, business management, product, and so on.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to our next question, bit of a different question, but I just want to talk about like I know a little bit about your passion for photography, for example. So I was wondering, did your passion for photography stem from the career path you chose? Was it the other way around? Or was it not like that? Were they kind of both interests at the beginning? And then also I wanted to ask like, do you know like what about design exactly intrigued you? I know you said like it was something obviously you were strong at and you were interested in, but do you know like what about it like really made you interested, or is it just like
Yeah.
you just knew you
Yeah.
were interested and that's it?
Yeah. Yeah. I asked myself which came first. So for me, it was photography that came first. Like I was doing like back in my undergrad in India, I was part of the photography club and all that jazz. So, and then as I came in, that passion continued. So, I often think, are they somehow related? I don't know. I cannot tell. So I could be a programmer and still have photography as passion for me. I joke with my parents sometimes if I grew up here, maybe I would have become a wildlife photographer. So that's neither here or there. So, and then, sorry, I keep forgetting the second part of your question.
No, that's okay. It's my fault. I should break it up a little bit so it's easier for you. But the second part of my question was, do you know what about design exactly intrigued you when you first got into it?
Yeah, I still remember the first class I took about design is about understanding users, having an empathy for your users. If we cannot have that, I have seen this happen so many times. A lot of people come into this area because there are a lot of jobs right now and they fail because design is actually not about what you draw or how you color the pixels. If you do not understand the users and have an empathy for what they are going through, then we're not going to be successful. So that's what attracted to me, because when I write a piece of code, I wanted to see how users are reacting to it. And that's what has always kept me going and still keeps me going. So the best part of my job is actually two things. When I can go and observe users, how they are using our systems or other systems, and just silently stand in the corner and observe, right? And the second part, which I don't get to do more often these days, is actually get into a room and actually design stuff, right? That's when I feel I'm in my zone. So yeah, that's what got me in.
Okay, so moving on to the last question I have, I wanted to keep it a bit brief so we had time for other questions from, I guess, the audience. So my final question for you is, obviously not everyone can become a designer, and some people just might not want to become a designer at all if they're not really interested in it. But do you think the fundamentals and foundations of design are important enough to be taught to everyone? I know you spoke about empathy. I know you were talking about it in the context of design, but obviously empathy is something that also matters just in everyday life, being able to connect with people, understand what they're going through. That's just one example. So do you think the foundations of design are important to be taught to everyone? Do you think like the average person should know like the essentials of design? Do you think it provides like use in like everyday life, and people may not recognize that? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a great question, Rohan. Yes, short answer is yes. I think they should teach usability one-on-one to everyone in every major program, right? I'll tell you why. Because when you peel back the origins of design, it's actually rooted in the psychology of human behavior, right? How our brain processes. I'll give you a very simple example. When you go to a stadium, right? 70,000 people, and you're just scanning around, like your brain is continuously looking at people. all of a sudden you see a friend sitting in the stands and you wave. Like, how does your brain process so much, right? Just imagine that. Like, it's processing at the speed and you can wave. So understanding how how human brain works, what are the limitations, how much information it can process at a time, how much it can retain in the short term, long term, and so on. I think that's fundamental. Everybody should understand that. And then as you look at design and the fundamentals of design, if it is taught, especially for people who are now getting into data analytics, right, with AI, machine learning, that just starts building into their DNA, right? So, and there are fundamentals. I can get a little bit more philosophical, right, with all the stuff happening in the society with racism and so on, right? If you don't have that empathy, if we have that empathy, I think we will be more inclusive.